You're watching a Highwire Media podcast. Filmgoers have long been captivated by compelling protagonists, those heroes and heroines who battle adversity with courage, righteousness, and that spark of hope. But among the pantheon of cinematic leads, there is a particular breed that has slowly but surely captured the collective imagination: the villain protagonist. A villain protagonist, in simple terms, is a central character who embodies qualities typically understood as evil, morally reprehensible, or at the very least, morally questionable. Instead of rooting for a hero on a straightforward quest to vanquish evil, the audience finds itself following the journey of one whose motives, ethics, or methods might well land them on the opposite side of virtue. Yet, paradoxically, these journeys can be equally enthralling, if not more so, than those involving standard heroes. In recent years, the popularity of films centered on characters who dwell in the moral gray area, or even the definitively dark side has soared. We see it in the fascination with spin-offs like Maleficent, Joker, Cruella, Venom, and in the success of darker television protagonists like Walter White from Breaking Bad, Tony Soprano from The Sopranos, or Dexter Morgan from Dexter. Their narratives offer a refreshingly twisted perspective on what it means to be the center of a story. Why do so many viewers find themselves spellbound by the exploits, rationalizations, and ultimate fate of an unapologetically bad character? Tonight, we argue passionately in favor of giving villain protagonists their own movies, far from encouraging morally bankrupt behavior. These films can serve as windows into the complexity of human nature, showing us how fragile our moral compasses can be, highlighting the social and psychological factors that shape one's path to villainy, and exploring universal questions about identity, responsibility, and redemption. Moreover, from a purely creative standpoint, stories told from a villain's viewpoint often breaks from formulaic tropes and inject an edge of excitement that many traditional hero-centric narratives can fail to deliver. Over the course, we will break down multiple angles: cultural, psychological, commercial, and artistic, all of which justify the rise of villain-led stories and suggest that we should not only embrace their existence, but actively encourage more of them. Alright, TV and movie fans, let's be honest. Keeping up with your favorite shows, new releases, and live events can feel like a full-time job. You got one app for binge watching, another for live TV, a separate one for sports. Before you know it, you're paying for 5 different services and still missing out on what you actually want to watch. Well, Hulu plus Live TV changes all of that. With Hulu plus Live TV, you get the best of both worlds. Not only do you have access to Hulu's massive streaming library, we're talking thousands of movies, hit TV series, and exclusive originals, you also get over 90 live channels including ESPN, ABC, FX, Fox, NBC, and more. That means live sports, breaking news, and your must-watch reality TV all in one place. Plus, let's talk convenience. No cable box, no contracts, no hidden fees, just instant access to the shows and games you love, whenever and wherever you want. Watch on your TV, laptop, phone, or tablet. It's completely up to you. So if you're tired of the hassle, the high prices, and the constant FOMO when a big game or season finale drops, Hulu plus Live TV is your all-in-one solution. Sign up today, cancel anytime, and start watching the way TV was meant to be on your terms. Get Hulu plus Live TV now and never miss a moment. Use the link in the description and join today. To build a strong case for more villain-led films, we first must clarify what we mean by villain protagonists. One could argue that there is a sliding scale that includes anti-heroes, morally ambiguous characters, and outright villains. By villain protagonists, I'm referring to a central character who outright embodies villainy, at least in their methodology or in their overarching goals, even if we find sympathetic angles buried in their motivations. This is more than just a gritty hero or a rebellious anti-hero. The best and most compelling villain protagonists are those who exhibit distinct moral divergence, internal logic or rationalization, narrative centrality, and significant conflict. Examples abound. The classic gangster film Scarface famously places Tony Montana center stage. He is a ruthless criminal, but viewers are still enthralled by the chaos he unleashes on his path to power. More recent pieces like Todd Phillips' Joker from 2019 show how focusing on a notorious villain's perspective yields strong audience engagement and critical debate. Thus, while an anti-hero might be the gentler cousin of the concept, the true villain protagonist is unflinching in making destructive choices. Yet, paradoxically, these choices can become an integral part of a film's unique draw. Villain protagonists are not an entirely new invention. In literature, we can look as far back as John Milton's Paradise Lost from 1967, which famously gave us an oddly sympathetic portrayal of Satan. Though widely regarded as a cunning manipulator and a rebellious angel destined to be the epitome of evil, many readers and subsequent literary critics have pointed out that Satan in Paradise Lost is arguably the most dynamic and intriguing character in the poem. Milton's portrayal offered a nuanced perspective that invites curiosity, setting a precedent for the idea that even evil characters can command an audience's sympathy, or at the very least, fascination. In cinema, early gangster films of the 30s, such as Little Caesar and The Public Enemy, showcased criminals as central figures. Though these films were heavily regulated by the production code, the Hays Code at the time, and often ended with the criminal's downfall, they opened the door to the concept that morally compromised characters could sit in the protagonist's seat. Audiences continued to relish such darker stories, particularly in film noir during the 40s and 50s. Movies teeming with femme fatales, crooked detectives, and morally ambiguous leads. With directors exploring the complexities of flawed individuals, it became clear that the public had a significant appetite for darker, twisted main characters. Post-1970s cinema, especially after the collapse of the studio system and as independent filmmakers gained more influence, further paved the way for morally compromised leads. A Clockwork Orange gave us sadistic, violent, but undeniably arresting in its energy and rebellious spirit. The Godfather placed the Corleone family, criminals by any metric, at the center of one of the greatest American films ever made. Audiences suddenly found themselves emotionally invested in the tragedy and the moral struggles of violent men. These examples highlight a key truth. The idea of a villain or a morally problematic character at the heart of the narrative has been an enduring concept, reaffirmed across cultural moments. While anti-heroes are not always full-blown villains, they occupy a neighboring conceptual space that can lead to full-blown villainy. The growth of the anti-hero archetype in television, seen prominently since the late 90s and early 2000s, in series such as The Sopranos, The Shield, and Breaking Bad, reflects shifting audience tastes. People began gravitating toward flawed, complex leads whose moral compass might not always point north. Tony Soprano, for instance, is a mafioso, a murderer, and a manipulator, but his personal struggles and raw honesty in therapy sessions made viewers connect with him in ways unimaginable a few decades prior. What we can learn from this is that as mass media evolves, so do societal tastes and the tolerance for morally dark protagonists. The rise of streaming platforms further magnifies these tastes. With so many viewing options available, audiences can afford to explore edgier, niche content that might not have enjoyed mainstream success a generation earlier. When people find themselves enthralled by the mental gymnastics of a Walter White or the vigilante violence of a Dexter Morgan, we see that the modern audience is hungry for layered characters, individuals who challenge them to keep watching, to reevaluate their own moral stances, and to witness a story that differs from the typical hero's journey. If these shows have taught us anything, it is that a protagonist's moral purity is far from a mandatory requirement for success. Now let's dive into the psychological factors fueling our fascination with villain protagonists. Why do audiences flock to see Joker's descent into madness or find themselves cheering for a cunning gangster? Well, to start off, you have forbidden fantasies and the taboo. At some level, people are drawn to witnessing rule breakers and outlaws in action. Media allow us a safe place to explore the dark side of human nature. While we may disapprove of their actions in real life, seeing these characters break social conventions stirs a sense of danger and excitement. There is a thrill in crossing lines vicariously through a story, an exercise that can help people examine the boundaries of their own morality. Number 2, you got the moral complexity and the gray areas. Villain protagonists exist in moral terrain that is anything but black and white. They force us to question not only their motives, but also the societal structures that shape them. By giving a villain their own film, creators can highlight the vulnerability, trauma, or systematic injustice that catalyzed their descent. This often reveals how villainy can be, in certain contexts, a reaction to oppressive circumstances or emotional turmoil, prompting audiences to contemplate social justice and empathy. And then you have catharsis. There is a certain cathartic release in seeing an unfiltered expression of anger, revenge, or rebellion. While we do not condone such behavior in our daily lives, these fictional explorations can be a form of emotional purging. Think about how many viewers of Joker reported feeling pity or a twisted sense of sadness for Arthur Fleck. Such catharsis can be psychologically cleansing, making us appreciate the moral and social boundaries in our real lives. And of course, you have the identification with the outsider. Human beings often empathize with the outsider or the underdog. Ironically, even a villain protagonist can be framed as an outsider, persona non grata whose cause is in some twisted way overshadowed or dismissed by the ruling norms. When we understand the character's background, struggles, or betrayal by society, we might come to see their villainous acts as a response to pain or a desire to challenge a hypocritical world. And this phenomenon reveals just how flexible human empathy can be. And then you have the allure of power and control. Villain protagonists often embody a sense of power and autonomy that heroes sometimes lack, as heroes may be bound by principles. Villains can, on a whim, seize control of situations, bend circumstances to their will, and disregard the typical constraints that hamper everyday people. There is an allure to imagining oneself momentarily freed from societal or moral structures. All these elements underscore that villain-led narratives can be meaningful, psychologically resonant journey. By delving into the antagonist's point of view, we unlock new emotional and intellectual layers, demonstrating that stories are not always as cut and dry as hero versus villain. A significant reason to champion the production of more villain-centric movies is that these stories challenge the well-worn hero-villain binary. Traditional film narratives often adopt a simplistic stance. The protagonist is the good guy, the antagonist is the bad guy. While such a formula can produce compelling works when executed creatively, it rarely invites the audience to question their own presumptions. Traditional film narratives often adopt a simplistic stance. The protagonist is the good guy, the antagonist is the bad guy. While such a formula can produce compelling works when executed creatively, it rarely invites the audience to question their own presumptions in any substantial way. By contrast, a film that places the villain front and center demands that we confront our biases. Are we truly correct about who is right or wrong, or do we see shades of ourselves in characters we once considered purely evil? Could the villain's motivations be, in some context, understandable or even justified? When we consider the real-world conflicts, it becomes evident that moral lines are rarely so sharply drawn. The process of painting the villain as the protagonist highlights the complexity of socio-political factors, personal trauma, class structures, or cultural schisms that can push people into radical behaviors. Consider a hypothetical scenario, a major film focusing on an eco-terrorist who used drastic destructive methods to protest environment neglect. Although their actions result in casualties or dire consequences, the film might highlight the hopelessness they feel as corporations ravage the environment unchecked. While we do not condone violence and destruction, an empathetic glimpse into the villain's perspective might shed light on the frustration and deep concern that triggered such extreme measures. This reflection might then spark a broader conversation about activism, climate injustice, or the moral cost of progress. Traditional hero-centric films that reduce such an activist to a one-note antagonist might overlook the humanity or legitimate concerns fueling their actions. Breaking away from the classic hero-villain mold enriches the cinematic landscape with narratives that mirror our complicated world. Real life is not simply a battle between good people and evil people. Rather, it is a web of compelling interests, each with its own rationalizations. Watching a villain protagonist navigate this labyrinth reveals truths that might otherwise remain hidden under the veneer of the more comforting hero archetype. And then there's a cultural reflection. You have society's evolving taste for darker themes. Society's thirst for villain protagonists can also be seen as a symptomatic of our evolving cultural consciousness. In an age dominated by complex socio-political realities, financial disparities, and the unstoppable flow of polarizing information, many might feel an increasing sense of disillusionment with simplistic moral narratives. The old stories of the unblemished hero triumphing over unequivocal evil can sometimes feel out of step with a reality that seems increasingly moral ambiguous. Moreover, social media has made it easier for marginalized voices to express discontent, shining a light on the systemic biases and structural injustices that traditional media narratives once glossed over. In this environment, it is perhaps more natural for creators and viewers to explore protagonists who are deeply flawed or even more malevolent, as a means of parsing the nuanced moral equations that define contemporary life. Films that embrace villain perspective can thus hold up a mirror to society's contradictions, frustrations, and moral rifts. The fact that these characters are no longer relegated to the fringes of storytelling, but are instead placed at the narrative forefront, indicates a craving for truth, albeit sometimes an uncomfortable one. When a villain's protagonist story resonates, it suggests that society is wrestling with complicated emotions, grappling with the difference between how we want the world to be and how it actually is. We cannot ignore the fact that the show business is still a business. One might ask whether villain lead stories are financially viable, or whether they are more niche experiments. Recent box office successes offer an answer. They can absolutely be commercial powerhouses. Take Joker from 2019, which stunned critics and audiences alike by grossing over $1 billion worldwide, made with a comparatively modest budget for a comic book film. Joker soared to become one of the highest grossing R-rated movies of all time. Similarly, Disney's Maleficent from 2014 turned the famed Mistress of All Evil from Sleeping Beauty into a lead whose story earned over $750 million worldwide, enough to inspire a sequel. Cruella brought new life to the puppy-hating villainess from 101 Dalmatians, reimagining her as an ambitious, fashion-forward anti-hero with a tortured background, ultimately resonating enough to generate healthy box office returns and glowing fan reception. The success of these movies underscores that the mainstream audience is open to seeing beloved or iconic villains take the spotlight in innovative ways. Moreover, with the marketing machinery of major studios behind them, these films can captivate the public imagination by offering a fresh approach to familiar properties, where superhero films risk saturating the market with hero saves the day formulas. A villain spin can stand out in a crowded schedule, potentially attracting viewers bored with repetitive tropes. Additionally, there is a built-in advantage when focusing on established villains. Characters like the Joker, Maleficent, or Cruella de Vil carry brand recognition. But beyond brand recognition, each new villain-led film can expand on a property's lore, fill in backstories, and craft new angles that can foster deeper emotional investment from fans. This becomes a financially appealing prospect for studios, particularly when they can promote these narratives as daring and subversive, pulling in curious viewers along with devoted fans. Stories driven by villain protagonists offer creative freedom for both writers and directors, freedom that traditional hero-led stories might not allow. So many cinematic tropes revolve around the hero's journey: the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, the mentor's wisdom, the confrontation with evil, the dark night of the soul, the triumphant return, and so on. While this structure has proven successful for eons, it can also be formulaic. In a villain-centric film, the narrative beats might flip or subvert many of those traditional tropes. Instead of a positive mentor figure guiding the hero towards self-actualization, the villain might be pushed forward by a manipulative figure or their own self-serving ambitions. Instead of seeking to protect a community, the villain might be on a quest to control it or sow chaos within it. Instead of a triumphant return, we might witness a descent into deeper despair or an ambiguous victory that invites us to question the meaning of success. Each variation allows for fresh storytelling, making the film feel unpredictable and therefore more engaging. Moreover, focusing on a villain's inner world allows filmmakers to delve into darker themes more directly, such as mental illness, systemic oppression, greed, lust, revenge, existential rage, and the weight of moral choices. This can lead to innovative visual styles and tonal shifts. Take a film like Joker, which leaned heavily on visual motifs, reflecting the protagonist's deteriorating mental state, a gritty, worn-down Gotham that felt all too real. That departure from the slick, hero-centric style offered something fresh, raw, and artistically invigorating. For directors and screenwriters, the villain's mindset can be an unmatched playground where all manner of innovating storytelling devices can flourish. Finally, subverting the audience's expectation about redemption arcs, punishments, or outcomes can lead to memorable cinematic experiences. Perhaps the villain's journey ends in complete triumph, flipping the usual hero wins formula. Alternatively, the film might end in heartbreak, or in a cyclical sense of entrapment that underscores the tragedy of villainy. These narrative possibilities demonstrate just how boundless the creative potential is when the main character operates outside heroic norms. Stories have always been, at their core, reflections of the societies that produce them. A villain protagonist can be a particularly powerful vehicle for social commentary, since the moral starkness of their actions heightens the contrast with the rest of the world. When we watch a hero confront social ills, we might think, if only everyone acted like the hero, society would be better. But when we watch a villain navigate a world riddled with hypocrisy, corruption, or societal flaws, we might be forced to ask, what role did society play in creating this monster? Villain protagonists can expose social injustices by showing how a person's environment, upbringing, or experiences can catalyze a drift towards a destructive behavior. A storyline about a corporate raider who bankrupts small businesses left and right can highlight the moral bankruptcy behind unchecked capitalism. A tale about a radical zealot committing acts of terror could dissect the dangerous power of indoctrination and politically marginalization. By following the villain's perspective, the film can lay bare the twisted logic that emerges when social institutions fail to protect or guide individuals constructively. Such stories become conversation starters, compelling viewers to not just condemn the villain, but also to question the broader context. Why do certain systemic issues persist? How do societal prejudices, poverty, lack of mental health support, or institutionalized corruption push individuals to take extreme routes? The villain protagonist is not just a personal anomaly, but sometimes a symptom of broader sickness. In this way, these films can spark deeper public discourse, urging us to examine the societal frameworks we may have taken for granted. Another compelling reason to champion more villain-led stories is the opportunity they offer to practice empathy in challenging contexts. We often think of empathy as the ability to understand and share the feelings of someone we perceive as good, or at least harmless. However, developing empathy for a villain protagonist without necessarily condoning their actions can strengthen our emotional intelligence. It asks us to stretch our understanding of human motivations, suffering, and rationalizations. By engaging with a villain's point of view, we learn the difference between empathy and approval. We can say, I see why this individual feels this way. I see the heartbreak or rage that drives them, while still condemning the moral failings that led to destructive behavior. This kind of empathic approach to storytelling is crucial in a world where demonizing those we consider other is often the path of least resistance. Media that facilitate empathy, even for dark characters, reminds us that no one is born evil in a vacuum. They might be shaped by personal or societal forces. A film that exemplifies this nuance can foster broader discussions about how we treat each other and how we address systemic issues that breed hostility. And of course, some critics are worried that featuring villain protagonists might glamorize crime, violence, or other morally reprehensible acts. The question of media influence on behavior is a perpetual debate. However, years of research into the relationship between violent media and real-world aggression have yielded no consensus that simply portraying villainy causes real-life villainy. The more relevant question for filmmakers is, how do we engage with villain protagonists responsibly? Films can do so by illustrating the psychological toll of evil acts, not glossing over or trivializing the damage inflicted on innocent characters, and by acknowledging that while the villain is central, the moral complexities of their action remain open to critique. These approaches allow audiences to experience the thrill and fascination that come with dark characters while still being challenged to reflect on the moral weight of those actions. Villain protagonists deserve their own movies. They embody the narrative, tension, and moral complexity that can push cinematic art to new heights, while satisfying the modern audience's demand for layered stories that do not shy away from darkness. Far from endorsing evil, these films serve as reflections of human nature, highlighting the capacity for cruelty, the fragility of moral integrity, and in some cases, the resilience of empathy and redemption. They allow us to explore taboo fantasies within safe, imaginative boundaries, prompting deeper conversations about the structure that foster villainy in our real-world societies. They can be vehicles for social commentary, urging us to reconsider how we classify good and bad, and to re-examine the social, political, and psychological forces that sculpt our worldviews. They also tap into potent psychological draws, curiosity, thrill, forbidden impulses, and the quest to comprehend the incomprehensible. Villain protagonists should indeed get their own movies because film, at its best, is a tool for exploring every facet of the human condition, including those that frighten and disturb us. We should not turn away from the dark side of storytelling. Rather, we should harness it to spark conversation, introspection, and ironically, deeper compassion. So here is to the cinematic rogues, the twisted masterminds, the fearsome foes who take center stage. They have stories worth telling, and we, as an audience, have lessons to learn from them. So I want to hear from you in the comment section below. What do you think about having more villain-centric movies? And let me know what your favorite villain-centric movie is. Is it the Joker? Let me know. And of course, who do you think is the greatest villain in movie history? And with that, give us a thumbs up if you like our video, hit that subscribe button down below, hit the bell notification button to be notified of future videos, and of course, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/cinemagold. As always, your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, and eventually take this show on the road. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.